to another edition of Turned Out a Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham. Once again, I'm bringing you a conversation with someone who grew up listening to punk, may or may not still be involved with punk, but had their life changed about the genre in a major way. And today on the show, huge guest for me, an incredibly cool person that I've known for a very long time. Finally got a chance to sit down with him and record this episode. Honored to have him on the show to kick off Negative Approach Week here at Turned Out a Punk. Chris Moore, a.k.a. Opie Moore, from the band Youth Patrol, from the band Negative Approach, and from Cross Wires, and as well as other solo stuff. He's a brilliant artist and has, just a real journeyman artist that played in one of the greatest hardcore bands of all time. Wrote some of the greatest hardcore songs ever. But we will talk about all that in 1 second. But first, if you would like to get in touch with me, head over to the email address, turnedoutapunkpodcast@gmail.com. That is run by my brother and show producer and guest booker extraordinaire, and he will get the message to me. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Left4Damian. If you want to support the show, the best way to support the show is just by telling all your friends about it, letting everyone know that you know that we have a podcast here and we do things like a Negative Approach Week. And, maybe they'll be interested in that too. Maybe I'm very excited about this week, as you can tell. Or you can support the show by heading over to patreon.com/turnedoutapunk and checking out the fun stuff we do over there. Video versions of this podcast, Footnotes, which is coming back with some new episodes real soon. A lot of other stuff over there. So thank you to everyone that does do that. Thank you to everyone that does do that. And speaking of thanks, this show would not be possible with the kind support of the fine folks at Vans, who came aboard a few years ago and said, Damian, do what you do. Just don't do it out of your own pocket. And they helped me cover the costs of doing this show, which, believe me, shockingly, there are costs with putting out a free podcast, including doing more than one episode a week, which is weird. Anyway. We don't have to get into that. Thank you, Vans, for being there to help me cover the cost of this thing. And that is that. Oh, also, you can subscribe to this and rate it on your platform of choice. If you're listening to this on iTunes, do it there. And thank you to everyone that does do that. It is, once again, very much appreciated. We will be going on tour. And when I say we, I mean the band Fucked Up that I play in with the band Faith No More. You can find out more information by Googling Faith No More Fucked Up, or searching for it in your search engine of choice, Excite, Yahoo, whatever you're using. And check out some of those dates. We're going to be playing 5 shows in the Midwest, and I am very excited to be doing that. Also, Fucked Up is tentatively, fingers crossed, planning on going on a tour in January and kind of all over the place from there on to celebrate the 10th anniversary of David Comes to Life, a record we put out 10 years ago, and it is being reissued by Matador Records. You can find out more information over on their website. Also, we've been putting out a bunch of stuff, including Year of the Horse, which is an 1.5 hour long song featuring some incredible guests and collaborators. Don't worry, you don't have to listen to me for the whole thing. And you can check that thing out. I guess it'd be like a Turn Out a Punk episode, but I'm yelling a lot more than I do on a Turn Out a Punk episode. So, but I'm not on the whole thing, once again. So check this thing out over at tankcrimesrecords.com. It's so late. I'm recording this thing very late tonight. Also, Get Better Records is going to be putting out the Fucked Up Epics and Minutes singles compilation. I am so stoked that this thing is finally coming out, and very happy to be out on that label as well. And so pick those things up on those websites, and hopefully we'll see you in person at some point. Socially distanced and everything like that, but with a mask on, but we'll get to hang out that way for the next little bit. One day we'll be all climbing all over each other again, but anyway. Let's move on to today's show. Today on the show, we are kicking off Negative Approach Week here on Turned Out a Punk with, as I said off the top, someone who I've known for a very long time. I first met Chris when we played with Negative Approach after they first got back together in Los Angeles at a festival well over 10 years ago now. And he was just the coolest. We hung out all afternoon, and just chatted. And, you know, over the years, playing with Negative Approach in those early years of their reunion, we'd see him a bunch and hang out, always, you know, just chatting and stuff like that. And then I hadn't seen him for, God, a long time. And then here I was at Dinosaur Jr.'s amazing Camp Fuzz weekend recently. And the Negative Approach guys were like, Chris is coming to the show today. Opie's coming to the show. And lo and behold, here's Chris. And we hit it off and picked up right where we left off all those years ago. Chris no longer plays in the Negative Approach reunion. He has been replaced by the Great Meat. But he's still part of the family, obviously, writing a lot of those songs that are so classic, and even gets up and plays with them. And it's like a 2-drummer assault when he does it. And it is phenomenal. Anyway, I digress. But Chris also played in Youth Patrol and also played in Cross Wires. We don't talk about it in the episode, but he also played in a key lineup of L7, the Detroit L7, not to be confused with the Los Angeles L7. Pick up that L7 reissue on Third Man, by the way. It is incredible. So he is this guy with this incredibly storied history, and I hit him up to do the podcast, and he was like, absolutely. And the next thing he knows, he's in front of a live audience. I should have warned him that it was going to be for a live audience at Camp Fuzz, but he rolled with it. He took it in stride, which believes me to the audio. The audio is live audio, so it's certainly not necessarily the audio that we are used to on the show, but it's good. It's fun. We listen to bootlegs, you know. We listen to Negative Approach practice tapes. We listen to Negative Approach demos. You know, we appreciate the content over the fidelity sometimes. It's not that rough though, but you know, just so you're aware. Also, so you're aware, Negative Approach have put out, I think it's sold out now at this point. Maybe you can find it in some record stores, but for Record Store Day, they released the Tied Down demo on Tang Records. So pick that up. They're also going to be reissuing on Tang Records the first 7-inch. I believe that thing may be still for sale. I think it's probably sold out by now, but check out tangrecords.com for more information about that reissue. If you do not have, you know, the Tied Down LP and the Negative Approach 7-inch in some format, you don't have to have the originals or anything, because those things go for ungodly money now, especially the 7-inch. But if you do not have these things in some way that you can listen to them, I implore you to pick these things up. These are two of the greatest, records, period, for me, ever, but certainly the greatest American hardcore records of all time in their respective formats, 7-inch and 12-inch. So yeah, if you are not familiar with Negative Approach, check them out. But also, Cross Wires are a band that I was not very familiar with, and they're a band that I've now tried to immerse myself in a little bit, and my gosh, can Chris write a song. So check out Cross Wires. They have quite an extensive discography from over the years. Also check out Youth Patrol. Youth Patrol, of course, was on the Process of Elimination comp. There was a Youth Patrol demo, which has been bootlegged. One day, hopefully, there'll be a proper reissue of this thing, because it rages. I think the first time I heard it was probably on the Killed by Hardcore Volume 1 compilation. I think it's on Volume 1. But this thing, this is a track. They must have been an incredible band to see live. Anyway, you can find Chris on Instagram at Chris Moore Music. You can also find him on Bandcamp, cmoore, Moore music.bandcamp.com, or crmoreart.com as well for his artwork. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Chris Moore, a.k.a. Opie Moore, on Turned Out a Punk, live from Camp Fuzz. Thank you, Dinosaur Jr., for having me.
All right. Why penalize? Did way better the first time. Fuck. Why penalize the early arrivers? Welcome to Turn Out a Punk Live at Camp Fuzz! And this is going to be an incredible one. This is someone who I've wanted to talk to for a long time, and I got here and found out Opie was going to be... Is it okay to call you Opie, Chris? Sure. Okay, I'm sorry. Chris was going to be here.
No, it doesn't matter.
And you are a legend. You know, obviously Negative Approach, Youth Patrol, Cross Wires, potentially McDonald's. I know you say you weren't in the band, but I have research that proves otherwise, so I don't know. I think maybe we should side with me on this one.
Okay. I was in the band, yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
Well, Chris, I got to start this off the way they all start off, which is, how did you get into punk from the first time you ever came across the genre?
I think it was radio. Foreplay. Maybe. I'm not sure now. Skateboarding. So skateboarding, skateboard park, 1978, very young. And I think the older skaters that were there were listening to kind of like classic, like Led Zeppelin and The Who. Mm-hmm. And then also they were getting records by, say, like the Stooges or the Clash, Devo, which I don't know punk what that means.
Oh, I think it was definitely in there.
So that I'm like, wow, what's this music, that I'm not used to. And so the older skaters would like play it in their like kind of boom boxes or whatever, just. And then there was a radio show in Detroit back then it was FM radio on Sunday nights called W4Play. I think that's what it was called. And they would spin like more like obscure music.
Okay.
So at midnight on Sundays, when no crowd on the radio, they would be like playing like like Sex Pistols or the Ramones and stuff like that. And so
it's interesting you brought up the Stooges, because like a lot of people come on the podcast and talk about how underground the Stooges were in the late 70s. Like, the records didn't get reissued, I think, till the late 80s. Like, they were kind of hard to come by. But obviously Detroit's different. Was there like a lot of awareness of the Stooges and kind of the place they had there? Like, were they playing on the radio?
Not for me, really, but there was more awareness there. But I think from my introduction to them was they just got lumped in with this other punk stuff, though they were coming from the 60s, and it was fringe. Mm-hmm. So the presentation at that time in 1978 or 79 was, I guess, they were just lumping in stuff that was like edgy music that didn't get a lot of exposure. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not really sure, but so I was like, oh, this could have came out in 1978.
It sounds like good.
Or say it's just like the first like Police record or something that was edgy or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's how I got into it. I was not, aware of it, even being, I'm embarrassed to say so, but even being from that city, I was sort of not aware of the timing of it,
Well, it really feels like punk rock brought awareness to the larger world, to the Stooges back. Like it feels like, Sex Pistols covering them, obviously. Right. And just sort of, like you're saying, there's that sonic connection, even though it's from the 1960s, to what is happening at the time. It does sound like it could have come out in 78. Like, there's an edge to it. What were some of the bands that you were hearing on that radio show? Was it like Detroit punk rock stuff?
It was like all across. So it was like British punk. It was like West Coast punk. It was, East Coast stuff. And, a lot of different... stylistically, a lot of different sounding bands. Mm-hmm. So, like, I was into Devo a lot. That was, the B-52s, new wave, or whatever they say.
But it's interesting how, go on, sorry.
And the Clash and stuff like that.
It's interesting, though, like, now, obviously, that stuff's categorized as new wave, but you look at Athens, and like, the B-52s were the first punk band. Yeah. Like, in that... eventually, probably during hardcore is when it starts really getting codified. Like, this is punk, this is hardcore, this is not. Yeah, yeah. But, like, back then, it's all punk. Yeah. What I'm saying? It's all edgy, it's all new. Right. What was the first show you went to?
I love answering this question. The first show was Devo at Motor City Roller Rink, which the promoter put on these shows in this roller rink. I think the Clash played there. I think Blondie played there. Anyway, so I went to see Devo, and I went with like all my skateboard buddies, and I wanted to be punk.
Yeah.
So my aunt, who was kind of like a hippie, had these weird ass clothes, and she had a leopard skin vest or something.
Yeah.
So I'm like, hey, Lynn, can I borrow that vest to go to this concert? And she's like, what concert are you going to? And I said, Devo. And she's like, Devo, So I wanted to have this weird outfit on, even as a little boy.
Yeah.
And so I had like a leopard skin vest with nothing underneath it. And like I was in marching band, and they had these really tight marching band like trousers, like kind of flare thing. And so I remember that was important. Like I wanted to look weird and be with all my weird friends. And then, so the concert itself, you kind of load into a space that was maybe twice as big as this space.
Oh, it's tiny.
And it was kind of small, like kind of a general admission. So, you would just walk into the space and literally like you could walk up to the stage, and those fucking guys, it was like getting hit by a train. They were so organized and focused, and it was just so tightly performed. I was like, oh my God, I was completely inspired, and you could everybody was kind of moving around and they were just a force, and then in the audience, I'm like meeting, you're kind of meeting, it was very communal. It was like, you might look over at somebody and be like, yeah, you're here, this is a weird vibe, whatever. And so I remember seeing like Larissa for the first time. Yeah. Like she just was like, whoa, man, she's just fascinating, just these fascinating sort of characters, And so I was really attracted to that.
Yeah.
So I was like, everybody's different, and it was a great show. And then so afterwards, after the show, everybody's like, or somebody's like, hey, you want to meet Jerry Casale from Devo?
Yeah.
Okay. And so all of us skater guys, like 6 or 7 people, were like, oh, fuck, cool, man, Jerry Casale. And they're kind of nervous and stuff. And then he comes out and he's very friendly and he's like, hi guys, thanks for coming to the show, and this is my wife, and da-da-da. And we were bummed out because we thought, God, he's so normal, and just like we had this other picture, and he was so polite and so gracious. That was another, that informed something in me about the breakdown of performer to audience, that exchange, because it was inspiring.
Well, it's so awesome when you think about punk rock, because that's what attracts me later on. That's still what I think attracts people to this day. And it's amazing how early that is established. Like you hear stories about the Ramones going on their first tour, or Blondie even going on their first tours, and hanging out with kids afterwards, and like the sense of all these people that were searching for something, and that ultimately winds up being punk, finding each other at these early shows. Like I find it fascinating that punk holds that place almost immediately.
Yeah.
It's so, I don't know. And maybe it's like that for other music scenes, and maybe I just didn't experience it because I was always focused on this thing.
Yeah, maybe it's timing and what you're open to at the time. You're right.
But there's few genres where like the artist is so willing to like destroy that mystique. Devo, like you're saying, that it's a crazy stage show, nothing like it, even that early on.
They're like from outer space or whatever, this. And then they're so arty, but then they're so, they're just normal.
Yeah, real people.
Yeah, real people.
So where did it kind of go from there for you? Like, were you playing drums already?
I was playing drums. There was like a kind of a neighborhood band that was playing like kind of like covers, older people. And then I would sort of go and watch them practice. And then the drummer was like, hey, Chris, do you want to try to sit in and play on something? And so that sort of was my getting into sort of like live rock or punk playing.
Would they play live, out and stuff? Do shows?
I don't think those guys did. I think they were just kind of jamming in the garage.
What kind of songs would they do?
Like anything that was sort of like anything from like Led Zeppelin or the Beatles to like the Clash or, just a mix of stuff.
That's a diverse repertoire for a band.
Yeah. They were just kind of, they were open-minded.
Yeah.
So, they were trying a bunch of different stuff, and I was just trying to I was watching the drummer, and I listened a lot to a lot of records, so I would always practice to the records and try to sort of, fake my way around what they were doing.
So what were some of the first local bands you remember hearing about? Would you like Cold Cock and all those kinds of bands?
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But I could not get into those spaces. I was just too young.
What about those? Would you hear those records? Could you find those records?
You could find those records. It wasn't easy. You had to. Somebody had to hand it down to you. You had to. I don't think they were readily available. At least not in my network. Again, I was so young. Maybe if I was like 18 or something, then and then I would go and hang out like in parking lots of clubs
and just listen
and just kind of listen, and then. I think there was I think I went to see the Police, actually. Or I went to the club where the Police was playing at Bookies, which is like smaller than this size.
And a legendary club.
Yeah. And, just hanging out in the back, and somebody had like an indie label. And it was like, well, if you like the Police, you might like blah, 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 a local band,
Was it like Cinecide and those bands and Ivories and all those types of stuff?
Yeah.
And so I find it fascinating how, I love that stuff, but it's so different than what you guys wind up doing a few years later.
Yeah. And that just came out of, then we jumped into sort of a hardcore thing, being influenced by, the Bad Brains and Black Flag and stuff like that. Myself, anyway. So
what was the first hardcore band you remember hearing, or another band that...
Well, the first hardcore show I ever saw, I think, was Minor Threat.
Oh, was the one in Windsor?
At Coronation Tavern.
Wow.
And it had the same impact.
Yeah.
It was so heavy, man.
I've heard that referred to as the birth of Detroit hardcore, that show.
It may be. I mean, the Necros opened the show, I think. But for some reason, maybe I didn't see the Necros. But for some reason, when Minor Threat played, it was just it's a whole different thing.
And was it kind of immediately that there was this young group of kids? Were you seeing all these young kids that would wind up being the Detroit hardcore scene?
Not there. But soon after that.
So was Youth Patrol first or Negative Approach? What did you start?
Youth Patrol. Well, Youth Patrol and Negative Approach probably started out around the same time. Mm-hmm. My guess is that around the same time. I don't know. I can't remember exactly.
Well, how did Youth Patrol come together? Was it just friends that you met at shows?
Skaters and stuff. And, more like a skater thing. We weren't, that wasn't... We didn't take it that seriously, I don't think.
The song on the comp is incredible.
Yeah.
The song on the Process of Elimination comp by Youth Patrol is one of the fucking best hardcore songs. Yeah. It rages. Did you guys record a lot of... there's a bootleg, I think. Or is there?
There is, but I have never heard it.
Yeah.
I've never heard... Graham from NA actually just reached out to me. He's like, there's a Youth Patrol thing going around. Are you aware of it? And I said, no, So, I don't know.
Did you find it interesting how culty this stuff has become? There's a documentary about it now, and people are paying tens of thousands of dollars for these records and things like that. It's just such an amazing period of time because there's so many bands that come out of there, and it's one of the best hardcore scenes. There's just and there's a range to it too. The Necro sound nothing like Necro.
No, there was a range, yeah.
And but you guys are all kind of approaching it with the same ferocity, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess the Necros really kind of held our hands, or my hand at least, in terms of because they were a little older, and just Corey and Touch and Go, and our first tours were with the Necros, and they had to drive because they were older, and it was just they were really friendly, sweet. All weird shit happened, violent shit happened, but those guys were looking out for us, I think.
Did you ever read Smegma Journal? That was their fanzine, right?
Yeah, Berries.
Yeah. Did you when do you remember meeting those guys or seeing those guys for the first time?
At that Minor Threat show.
So, like, was it immediate that you kind of like?
No, they were kind of intimidating. I mean, they were intimidating to me, at least. And actually, I remember going to they also had parties like in Toledo at Todd the drummer's house. And we didn't really know Necros then, but because we were doing this, we were exploring punk and stuff, and because it was so small, we got invited to this party in Toledo. And I remember sort of being challenged, like we were kind of in the back, and then Barry, who was singing for the Necros, was like kind of challenging us, like, what are you doing here? Like, so it was a rocky, it was a little bumpy at first, and then it was like instant friends.
Yeah.
Like, so I guess he was like sussing us out, like just sort of like, what is this? Some kind of like, who told you to be here? I'm putting words into his mouth, but he definitely gave off a vibe like very suspicious.
I can picture him saying that word for word.
Yeah. Just kind of like, I'm like, God, what a jerk. We came to his party. That was my attitude. Like, but I was like, all right, well, whatever.
When you get into it, it's amazing how protective you feel of it. And it's like becomes your thing.
I guess that's what it was.
Yeah, and there's like another kid.
Because I was the same. I was, I could have been like that too. At times, like, well, when it got to where the culture sort of changed to a more violent thing, where there's people, I was like, what are these guys doing here? And are they even into the music? Like, because then there would be these fights and weird, like, creepy shit going on. Like, that wasn't part of the vibe in the beginning. So I was I was kind of giving that look too, like, sort of like, what are you doing here, man? So
it's amazing doing the show how you kind of begin to see like a natural life cycle when you get into punk. Like, you're fanatical, like a religious convert about it, and then you mellow with age, and then you're like, maybe I'll check out some other genres here and there. Yeah. Like, it's such a natural progression that everyone seems to go through, and I guess it's like it's one of the rare places that you have as a young person that says what you say is important and we should pay attention to what you're doing. So it's such a freeing feeling finding it, right? Like, as a kid, like, you're like a teenager and you're making records that people are picking up all over the world.
Yeah. Which we didn't know. That was not the thing. We had no idea.
Yeah.
It was just like, hey, we got the resources and might as well do it. And Corey was very focused.
Why do you think it is that scene, is it because of Touch and Go? Because you had a label that was able to document? Because it's interesting how certain scenes become canonized.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah, I guess so. And the magazines and we toured a little bit.
And the music's
people
awesome.
Talked about it.
The music's amazing. I think that helps too.
And then we would, the coast, like, we would write letters to, the bands would share letters with each other if they're going on tour or whatever. This is maybe jumping a couple subjects, but there's there was an exchange coast to coast and scene to scene, like, with other band members and setting up gigs and stuff like that.
It really is like, you see it, this youth network form, and it's a touring network that people still follow, and it's this youth network to, like, share information with one another. Like, it really is it's such a powerful thing because it's the first time that you really have, like, a youth culture that's completely controlled by youth. Like, a lot of times it would be adults exploiting youth culture.
Right.
Do you remember how Negative Approach came together? Do you remember meeting everyone?
Well, I mean, they were together, and then at the skateboard, there was a skate park show, which was kind of early hardcore. That's the local park that we skated in. Necros played, Youth Patrol played, Negative Approach played, a couple other bands, and that's kind of when I met those guys. I knew Rob was the brother of the bass player in Youth Patrol, was the guitarist in Negative Approach. So that's when I kind of met them. And then they were losing the drummer and bass player, and they saw Youth Patrol and they were like, "Okay, would you want to play with us?" And then we made the records. I immediately jumped. Like, as soon as they asked, I was like, sorry, no more Youth Patrol. You know, they were more serious, more intense.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of get to that.
And what were those early shows like? Like, you mentioned the violence that comes in later on, but what were like the early...
Everybody kind of knew each other. I mean, the Freezer Theater was a little different, but you know, like kind of like a parties, you know, vibe. And just shoving each other around, you know, mostly fun, like kind of innocent, dancing, you know, kind of like stage diving stuff, but really like loose, really raw.
Do you have any memories about recording that first 7-inch?
It was done at Corey's house.
Yeah.
And he had us in the basement in a mixing console, like kind of in like a laundry room around the basement. And we did it. I remember I thought we were kind of prepared. And we did it pretty fast. And there was a skateboard ramp in the driveway, like a quarter pipe. So I remember I think we set up, recorded in like a half an hour, and we're like, I think it's done, you know, like sort of like Corey's like, I think we got it, you know, or whatever. And then we kind of listened back and thought, oh, this is not that good or whatever. And so we were skating around and maybe had lunch or something or whatever. And then I think we did some stuff over again. And that was it. You know, it was like probably done inside of 2 hours. And then we did these background vocals in Corey's kitchen, you know, where, you know, the chant vocal.
Yeah.
And I think that was the overdub, the one overdub of the record. Okay, so everybody's got to say ready to fight. Like, and so it was kind of fun. And Corey he was just learning how to use this gear. So it's like, it's on, okay, good. This works good. Roll, you know, just like, no, you know, nothing about the atmosphere of the room or anything like that.
It's something space, but it's so awesome how like immediate those records are, and I guess it's because of the way you're recording it. Yeah. You're not worried about all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Was there a demo before that? Because I know there's a tied down demo. I don't think so. But
I don't think so. There's just like practice tapes.
And what are your memories of like those tours that you guys did? Because you did tour the East Coast a little bit.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Those were fun. I mean, I remember getting into New York for the first time and going, I'm going to live here. Like, you know, I'm just like, I'm going to live here when I get older.
And you did.
And I did. But it was fun. It was everybody, again, looking out, the older people looking out for the younger people. Like, watch out for this on this corner. Look out for this. This could happen. You know, the promoter going out of their way to getting us a place to stay, whether it's like somebody's house or so-and-so from the local rag is going to be here to do an interview. You know, a lot of organization, mm-hmm. You know, so, I mean, our expectations were low anyway, but so when you go into a space with that kind of attitude and then stuff works out, you're like, wow, that's cool. So I don't remember any sort of, in the early days, going that awry, you know. I mean, you know, stuff would happen, but nothing, you know, worse things could have happened.
What were your thoughts going to these other cities like Boston or DC and just seeing
you know, the vibe was totally different.
Yeah, that's what I was going to wonder. Yeah. Like every scene seems so unique.
It was a little different. DC was really warm, kind of liberal, you know, intellectual kind of vibe. New York was really like unpredictable. Like really like, again, everybody was sort of had a different sort of energy. Very exciting though. And then Boston was more uniformly, you know, this is what we do, you know, very male.
I've heard it called jockey.
A little jockey. But they were cool.
Yeah.
You know, they were cool. Really like really aggressive audience. Super aggressive audience.
It's interesting to see how it develops where you hear the stories about the DC people going to Boston and then all the Boston people being energized by it and then them going to New York and fighting people in New York and then the New York scene being energized by it. Like it's almost like this aggressive energy is something that's kind of being passed around.
Yeah, yeah.
Was that something that happened in Detroit early on? Like you mentioned the violence that would come later, but were kids wild at the shows? Like I see why be something that you're not. The footage looks amazing.
Yeah, I mean, to me it was wild, but I never felt like in danger really. I mean, I remember one time Negative Approach playing, and then somebody like throwing like a cup, like a mug, and it just totally just bam knocked me on kind of didn't directly hit, but just kind of on the side of my head. Like that kind of thing, like halfway through the set, like, whoa, that's this kind of stuff that could happen. And I don't think that was just out of like, hey, I can throw this cup at the stage.
Yeah.
I'm not, I didn't feel like it was like you suck. It was more like, this is rowdy, just like.
Yeah, for better or for worse, it's like kids ruled, right?
Yeah,
so it's like even on the bad decisions sometimes.
Yeah, it's just.
What were some of your favorite bands to play with?
Well, Minor Threat. I mean, all of the renowned bands that I mean, Dead Kennedys, Bad Brains, Black Flag. I mean, we played with all those people. So, I mean, God, they were all so good.
Yeah.
It's all different, too. Just different delivery, different dynamics.
What was the moment though? Because we talked earlier. You mentioned there was like a certain moment where you were just like not into it.
Yeah, just I guess the repetitiveness of the music, in terms of I don't know. It just got sort of repetitive stylistically, and with Negative Approach, we were in that sort of area where we could start to really do stuff.
Yeah.
And go on tour and stuff. And I was like, I'm just sort of getting burned on this, And John really wanted to keep it going. And so I was like, I can't contribute the same way as I did. So I feel like it doesn't make sense.
I think it's so interesting to think about where you guys would have gone, sound-wise,
And they did John did, Graham stayed in the band, and then John recruited two really great musicians for guitar and drums. And they, he tried to do something that it didn't work out.
I think Graham moved to DC
to
Sam Hain.
Yeah.
And it feels like there was such a natural, like around 84, there's like this period where, like look at Dinosaur Jr., like they talked about it when they were on the show. Like there's this period where people are like, yeah, I'm just kind of going to move on. And that's the birth of indie rock right there. Like this mass of people wind up becoming the foundation of this indie rock scene. What were the bands that were kind of like pulling you away?
Stuff like that kind of jangly, artier, like the Athens, like, more melodic based music or like artier music, like the DBs or Green on Red.
Mm-hmm.
And then just like, I was really into like Stiff Little Fingers and something that had a melodic element to it. So, and then I started playing guitar. Well, I started playing guitar in NA, like to write songs, but then I started, writing songs and I wanted to sort of play guitar and be a guitarist. So,
was there a scene for that kind of music at the time?
No, not really. I mean, we weren't in the scene. My band was not in that scene yet. There was probably a scene, but I was still with the sort of hardcore stuff. Like I was told you earlier that Corey Rusk from Touch and Go, booked my post-NA band on the strength that I was in NA and not even hearing what I was doing and, setting up this bill where, the audience just was like, fuck, you guys suck. Or just like, what is this? Like, this is so wimpy or uncool.
Yeah.
You know, and and then
But you guys put out like a ton of records. Like this Crosswires.
Yeah. No, eventually that band found an audience, and that wasn't. I mean, a couple of people were like, "Hey, that's pretty cool."
Mm-hmm.
Like the Necros guys actually really liked it, and they we did a date with them, and it almost sort of worked a little bit better.
What year? What era would that Necros?
That was like 85-ish.
Okay, yeah.
85.
Yeah, because they're also getting a little more rock as time.
Yeah, they were getting like a heavier, like a more of a metal
vibe. Yeah,
groove going on. Yeah.
There's that photo where they've all got this, the tour where they all got the super long hair.
Yeah.
And by that point, and it's
so that was, and then John, that was pre-Hyenas, I think. So he wanted to do something different too.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just like like when you guys first threw the hardcore band, you're playing in all these punk bands are just like looking at you guys like, why don't you get what we're doing? Like, and you guys are doing something like you always have to become that band to the next generation eventually. Yeah. They gotta reject you so they can carry on.
Right.
But there's also like this history of power pop in like kind of Michigan and Detroit area, like the Romantics, the reruns, and like there is that. But it's interesting how there's not. I guess because hardcore was such a big part of the culture then. There's not really room for the popular stuff.
I don't think so. Unless I just wasn't aware of it. Or,
What was it? You guys recorded the demo for Tied Down.
Yeah.
And then you do the LP. How long is that before you leave the band?
It was, I mean, I knew that was like sort of the end. So I left right after that record came out, I think, pretty much. But that demo was fun to record because we were like really in shape as a band. We were really trying to be good. We took it really seriously, had been playing a lot. And so we were like in a good spot, like musically, I think.
And also like weirdly physically in shape too, because I looked at that photo on the back of the Tied Down LP. You guys are all ripped to shit. Like it looks like Manowar of the Misfits.
Well, we were just playing a lot. It's kind of, skating and stuff. Pretty healthy living, I guess.
Do you remember when the Misfits first came to town?
Yeah. Well, we met them in New York. Like Glenn came to the show, and we met those guys, and they were all super cool. They to me seemed very experienced. A little weird because they had like a little bit of a costumey vibe, but they were super friendly and like polite New York guys, and so. We told him, hey, said Detroit loves the Misfits, because certain like DC for some reason wasn't really into the Misfits that much.
Yeah,
or people being very suspicious about their show.
I've heard certain people in DC go as far to say that they hated the Misfits.
Yeah, it's like so, but I don't know, maybe because Detroit had Alice Cooper and Kiss and all that kind of stuff. We're like, oh, that's cool. They're a little different,
I've never thought about that, like why Detroit went for it and DC didn't, but I guess also because DC is like so stripped down.
Yeah.
Like it's so like, it's so like, here's the facts. It's very Ian.
Yeah.
Here are the facts. This is this thing. This is that thing. And we're not part of that thing.
Yeah.
And whereas you're right, Detroit's got like, there's like a lot more theatrics in Detroit rock and roll.
I guess.
Even the Stooges.
Yeah, right. And so the Misfits would come through a lot, and the first shows I think were booked with with Corey sort of at the helm, and then they didn't need Corey after a while because they had an audience. They could play Kalamazoo, they could play Ann Arbor, they could play Detroit. They could play 3 cities in Michigan. Once they got moving.
Mm-hmm.
So I always had fun listening to their records and seeing their shows. It was a different experience than seeing Bad Brains or something like that. It was a different performance. But I thought the songs were really hooky and, they could, very melodic.
They're such an interesting band because it's like they're like kind of the ultimate punk band, and at the same time not at all a punk band.
Yeah, they're almost like bubblegum rock.
Yeah, with Elvis singing.
Yeah. It's just like,
but there is something that, those records just sound otherworldly.
Yeah,
it doesn't really sound like they would have come out of any scene.
Yeah. Glenn had some weird vision.
Yeah, and it's really like imagine being that self-assured.
Yeah,
that you're like, okay, we're going to come out, we're going to wear all this goth makeup, I'm going to do all the art myself, and it's going to be this complete like figured out aesthetic, and just being that assured at that young of an age.
And the presentation. I mean, obviously, it got more and more theatrical.
Yeah,
there was always some presentation involved. Where NA was like, is it on? We're on. Like no presentation, not a presentation at all. Like just like, hopefully we make it through.
But I think that's the thing about it is that's why it still holds true and rings so true to so many people. Like even younger kids, like watching some of the younger kids yesterday, watching you guys play, or like NA play and then you play in the end with them. It's like, because it's authentic and because it's real and there's no edifice.
Yeah.
I think that's why you can always still connect with it.
Yeah, maybe.
Which, I guess, then this is with the counter argument to that.
Yeah.
They still get connected with a pretty big audience as well.
Yeah.
They feel like they were a stadium band the whole way along.
Right.
And now they're finally like playing the place that they need to be playing.
Yeah, there you go. That's probably was in the back of their minds the whole time.
How did the freezer change things when it opened?
Well, it was a space where bands that didn't have a space could play. So it started out as kind of like it was a theater for like Artie, Cass Corridor, Wayne State presentations, and the guy there would be like, "You have an idea for a show? Hit me." And okay, we'll see if it can work out. And then so I think maybe John and Corey sort of, well, we have this scene, and this is what goes on, and what does it cost, to rent this space, or how much do you need, And then the shows were fairly successful, and then eventually we built a stage, and it didn't lasted like under 2 years, but.
Yeah, it's like
that felt like a lifetime because there's so many shows and stuff that transpired around that sort of time and that space.
Have you seen that documentary that came out?
Yeah.
It's one of the things I thought was the biggest revelation to me was how sketchy the guy that ran the freezer was.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I never knew him.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. It seemed like no one ever met him.
Yeah, I just knew that, okay, so Corey's taking care of it. I trust him. It'll be fine. But I knew there was another, like a shadow presence, And he keeps himself, in that documentary, he keeps himself sort of shaded.
Yeah. He still seems kind of sketchy.
Yeah.
When you're watching the documentary. If you haven't seen this documentary, the club owner, who apparently hung out in a van out front of the show.
I remember he was not in the space when our shows were going on. That's what I was told.
Yeah, he's in this van. He didn't want people to know that he ran the club. Like, it was a lot of stuff going on there you have questions about. And then Minor Threat had to shake him down for the payment. For the show there.
I mean, that show was fucking nuts, man. I mean, there was a huge fight. Again, that's when it was starting to shift, where it was like a whole, almost like a 20, 30 different people, or people you wouldn't necessarily recognize, entering around. It was too crowded to get in. There was a big fight that night. And that was kind of the end. There was police. I mean, the police came and they basically just bailed. Because at that time in that neighborhood, they're like, what are all these white dudes beating each other up for? Like, fuck this. Like, let them beat the shit out of each other, Seriously, it was like, the cop kind of pulled up and was like, just, and I remember like us chasing after them, like throwing shit at their car, and other people sort of like kicking the car, and they're just like moving on,
Wow.
It was weird. It was so weird.
Where do you think this influx of new kids were coming from? Like the kids that were bringing more violence to the shows and things like that?
I think from the suburb, just a suburb. We were from the suburbs, but I don't know. It's just they heard it was a place to act out. I don't know.
Yeah, I hear stories all the time. It's like, yeah, like the shows would be cool and it'd be one crowd, but then like the Dead Kennedys or the Circle Jerks would show up, or like a bigger band, and then you'd have like this other influx of kids. Not necessarily in Detroit, but I hear this about, you hear about it in Boston, you hear about it in all these different cities.
Well, with those like Dead Kennedys, when we played with them, I mean, there was like 1,000 people there. So that was, to me, that was like a rock concert. Yeah. So the venue was huge, and so that dynamic was, there was like stuff going on in the front, but mostly people were there to make the scene, make the show. It was like a big show. So at least at that time with the Dead Kennedys. To me, they were like rock stars. Yeah. Because there was like, that was NA's biggest show at that time. It was opening up for the DKs. I mean, when we opened up for the Bad Brains, there was like 30 people there.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the Bad Brains, for some reason, were not, I mean, it was like the next day they were huge. Yeah. It was like, for some reason, they were not they were not, it wasn't a full room. It was the same room, and there was like 50 people there.
It was the same room that had 1,000 people in before?
I think so. I think it was the early Clutch Cargo's space. And Black Flag, we opened up that show. That, again, sold, packed to the gills. Like, and Henry, just like, that band at that time, fuck. And Des was playing guitar, Henry was singing, and they were just, it was so powerful.
That lineup, the 5-piece lineup is...
And they were on fire, man.
What about DOA? Did you ever see DOA?
Yeah, we played with DOA.
What did you think of them?
I didn't really get them that much, and I like them though. They were really committed and very good. I did not like their music that much. I got the 12-inch
Hardcore 81.
Yeah, Hardcore 81. I liked it, and then I just thought they'd been around. They were very committed. I respected them, but it didn't hit me. And then later on, how they kept going. And so we did a couple dates with them in the reunion stage of NA. And, it was a blast. They're super cool people. But those guys are nice.
I guess it goes back to what you're saying about, like, the Misfits not hitting in D.C., but hitting in Detroit. It's kind of the same with DOA. Like, anyone you talk to from D.C. is like, when DOA came to town, that's when the scene started. Like, that was, like, a huge thing.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because, like, if you put DOA and the Misfits on a spectrum, they would be on the opposite ends of that spectrum.
Right.
Politically, and ideologically, every level.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how, I always think about the way geography affects music, and like the way, especially now it's changed so much, right? Because we can all listen to the same stuff. Like, it's not really as regional as it once was. But when it had that regional identity, it's amazing how certain stuff would land and certain stuff wouldn't land for different places.
Yeah.
What was the moment that you look back upon as being like the defining moment of that hardcore era? Is it that Minor Threat show at the Freezer? Like, is there a moment that you kind of look back on?
God, that's hard to say. No. I mean, there's moments. I just think maybe I just like the sort of communal, like sort of I don't know. It's hard to say. I can't really recall or clarify, I guess.
Yeah, like it just feels like it's such an area that's focused on. Like, there's books about it, there's documentaries about it, and it's such a short, brief period of time.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's hard to distill anything down to like a single moment or thought, but it's just.
I guess the Freezer era would be that when it was the healthiest. Mm-hmm. Like, just in that time, because we had the Freezer, and then we had our practice space, and then Clutch Cargo's was the more professional space that had a promoter. The bigger acts would play there.
Yeah.
So all those things were kind of like right next to each other in a time frame.
Yeah.
So that 82, late 81, early 83 would be that time.
That's the best.
Like, well, for me, that was felt like the healthiest of the scene was.
What do you think happened in Detroit? Like, why do you think that scene fades? Because, like, obviously there's another hardcore scene that kind of comes in a little bit later, but
Yeah, it's just the people kind of like trying different things and music shifting a little bit. Other musicians getting bored with it. Younger kids introducing different stuff.
Yeah, but there wasn't really. It didn't feel like there was a scene that kind of immediately was ready to take place, right?
No. It was like that was like the Greystone. That venue in Dearborn had a kind of a more variety of bands.
Yeah,
which I didn't really partake. I went to a couple shows, but I was kind of like on to something else, I guess.
Were you out of New York? Were you gone from Detroit?
No, I didn't. No, I was still around.
Did you ever go to Blondie's?
Yeah.
There's always terrible stories about the security there being.
Well, to me, that was more of a sort of a metal scene, but I mean, like G.G. Allen did some stuff
At Blondie's?
Yeah. I didn't go to that show. I just heard about it.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
I also hear about Boom and the Legion of Doom's legendary show where they cover the stage with dead deers, or Slaughterhouse and the singer lighting his hair on fire.
Yeah, I didn't know. I wasn't aware of that stuff.
It got real gnarly.
Yeah.
Like Detroit gets really, really heavy with some of this stuff.
I mean, maybe stuff like that. I blocked it out. I don't know. I don't remember that much. I just remember fights and just random shit that would happen.
That becomes something that almost typifies Detroit hardcore at a certain point, as the violence becomes. Like I talked to the guys from Cold as Life, and they talk about how insane the violence got at a certain point. Like it was something that really came into that scene and really took hold in a way that it didn't.
And you could just feel it, like the energy of certain people. It's just like you could tell that they just want shit to go wrong. Like they want to cause trouble, trouble. And so,
do you think it's like, is it drugs? Is it poverty? Like, what caused that scene to get so heavy at a certain point? Like the Cole's Life guy said, it was drugs. Were definitely.
I mean,
around.
Drugs were not around. I mean, they were around, but they weren't in my, spectrum. Like in my sort of. It seems like the older musicians kind of did some stuff, but they kind of kept it away.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like aware that maybe that was going on, but it was never sort of like exploited or sort of, I don't remember like being offered anything really then as a kid. I knew stuff was going on, but I never saw it really. So the hardest thing I would see would be like somebody having a beer, And I knew there was like heroin stuff going on, but they kept it away.
It feels like at a certain point, I guess when crack comes in, and then you have like it seems like it must have spilled over to a certain point because there is a lot of people that passed away. From that scene. Anyway, Chris, this has been incredible.
Oh yes, yeah.
And anytime you want to come back and do this thing,
okay, cool.
But before you go, how do you view Negative Approach's legacy now? Like it's a brief chapter of your life, and you've done so much other musically.
Accident.
Yeah, but like it's so important to so many people.
Yeah.
Like we go to Japan right now and talk to kids about it. We could go to Mexico and talk to kids about it right now.
Well, the first time we did the reunion thing, there was like a Touch and Go anniversary. They're talking about us. John's like, there's this activity that's going to go on. Are you up for it? I said, yeah. Touch and Go 25-year reunion, Big Black's playing, a lot of good acts. And I was like, all right, cool. And I'm thinking, there'll be like 1,000 people there. And then we're getting these reports like, maybe it's going to be 2 days. I think they want to put it in a bigger space. And then so it kind of blew up, and it wasn't because of just Negative Approach, but just all the other bands on the bill. And then it just felt really fun. It was fun to rehearse for that and practice. And I had always been friends with those guys, and John and I have always been relatively tight. So, and we would jam anyway. So
you guys would jam?
Yeah, we would goof off and.
Did you ever record anything from these jams?
I don't think so. Maybe some tapes and stuff. No, we would work on like NA stuff or covers or something. And then So that went really well. Then we got asked to do All Tomorrow's Parties from Thurston Moore and Sonic Youth. Again, another big event, and that went really good. And then somebody in Belgium was like, you want to do a one-off and see what happens. And then that was really successful. So, and then we did a tour, a short, like European tour, and it was successful. So it was fun. But I could tell, I'm like, oh my God, it's so weird that people are connecting to this music. And that I thought we were just kind of like tossing off as kids, Like, so it's hard to, on one hand, you would, like, after a show, oh, that was the greatest thing I ever saw, and I'm so grateful that you're able to do this. And that I was kind of uncomfortable at times, like, sort of embracing that, because I was like, well, it was just kind of an accident. We didn't really, there was no intention to do anything. So, I was appreciative, but at the same time, I'm sort of like checking myself, like, it's not like Jimi Hendrix, or something. You know what I mean?
Did you have any idea prior to that, like, because AFI covers you guys, like every band, you're probably one of the most covered hardcore bands ever.
People started asking about doing covers, and then like that sort of '90s grunge. We started getting credited for like a Nirvana things that mentioned Negative Approach, and now all of a sudden there's a bump in the Touch and Go royalty.
The Total Recall sales go up.
Like if somebody says something about it, so it becomes this mysterious. Well, I'm into Nirvana. What's Negative Approach? Like, what's that? So I think that kind of media attention fed into some of that. And,
I was thinking about that today. You guys got to have to be one of the most covered hardcore bands ever.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, people were asking us, can we do X, Y, and Z? And usually we're just like, yeah, do whatever you want.
I think there's 2 tribute records.
Yeah. But, so I'm grateful that people are into it. And it's fun to play. So it's not easy to play. But.
Well, Chris, I'm grateful that you put the effort into play it.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful you took the time to do this.
Yeah,
I'm grateful for all you being here. Thank you, everyone, very much. Give it up for Chris Opie Moore.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chris, for coming on this show. And hopefully you can come back here in a little bit more of a chill, not in front of a live studio audience kind of vibe, and we can have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation at some point, because as I said off the top, this guy's got quite the resume with these bands, and a lot of stories. I didn't even ask about this L7 thing. Here I am wasting an opportunity to talk about that. There's a lot of stuff I should have asked him about, and I will in the future, because I'm going to be talking to people from Negative Approach any chance I can get. Speaking of which, coming up in a few days, my Frank Sinatra, the god of vocalists himself, John Brannon, will be here. Now, if you are a long-time listener of Turned Out a Punk, I think his name has come up many times on this show, and he is someone who I look up to and respect as being one of the greatest aggressive vocalists ever, from Negative Approach to the Laughing Hyenas to Easy Action. And now, because of Third Man Records, we will finally be able to hear the band that started it all off, Static. It is coming out finally. This is a very storied tape when you hear the episode, we'll find out as well, that actually is several dozen tapes that make up this oeuvre for Static. But this has been stuff that has been rumored to be floating around for years, and now finally Third Man is putting it out in some sort of digestible format, and I've heard this thing. It lives up to the hype. This is such an important release. I'm going to be rambling on about this next week, but I am very excited that this thing is coming out. I really am. You think I was investing in Third Man, but I really do think you should all pick this thing up. It is very important to the development of this music. Anyway, we'll talk about this next week. John Brannon, or in a few days, not next week, a few days, because it's Negative Approach Week here at Turn Out a Punk, and I guess Static Week too. All right, that's it. Remember, as always, Black Lives Matter. The lives of Indigenous peoples and First Nations peoples matter. We need to protect trans kids. We need to help trans people protect themselves. There needs to be a stop of hate and violence towards Asian people and people of different faiths, and just knock all that shit out, because this stuff, as I say, this ain't political. This is just human rights stuff. People just deserve to live without being in fear of their safety and their family's safety. So do what you can. Get involved, get informed. This podcast also, it should go without saying, but unfortunately it doesn't. It is a pro-choice podcast, and we support people's right to choose what they do with their reproductive systems. And so get involved. Get involved if you can, with your time, with your body, by showing up at rallies and protests. Just look at organizations that are doing good work. And if you can donate money to them to help, do it. If you can donate time to them to help, do it. Because the world only gets better when we start making it better. We can't rely on anyone else to make it better for us. We just got to do it ourselves, right? DIY style. Speaking of being DIY, make your own culture, because anyone can do this bullshit. A podcast? Fuck, anyone can do that. Start a zine. That's some real work. Start a band. That's a little bit of work. Emotional work, that's for sure. But just do a drawing for yourself. Make your own culture. Do something. It'll help your mental health. And speaking of helping your mental health, try meditating, because I didn't believe in it, and it works for me. Well, I don't know if it works for me, but I feel better. So maybe it will make you feel better too. Who knows? Maybe. Sign your organ donor cards, though, because that will definitely make someone else feel better when they can give them a new organ. And you don't need that when they take them from you. They're not going to come to your house. It's not like that Monty Python sketch that you can't do that on television, ripped off, where the organ donor peoples come and steal your organs when you're still alive. No, they wait till you no longer need them, and then they take them. And that's it. Stay safe, everyone. See you in a few short days. Live Negative Approach Week as best you can, because, wow, what a great week. All right. I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.